Can everybody hear me? I don't want to have to use my coaching voice. I coach lacrosse and basketball, which means I am doubly the loudest person that you will ever hear in a room anywhere. So thank you all for being here. Is everybody having a great day at CPAC so far? Yes. All right, did everybody have their afternoon caffeine so you can make it through the breakout sessions? And I'm not judging, but I know there are parties tonight. I know there's some things going on. But we're, all kidding aside, we got a great panel for you all today, talking about an issue that is of great concern to many of us. And this year we chose to call it Scammed Parenthood, celebrating slaughter in the age of empathy. There's a lot to that. That's kind of a big title, but this is a big issue. This is a complicated issue. This is a serious issue. So we've got, to my right, Congressman Jody Hice. He represents Georgia's 10th district. Sits on government reform and oversight and natural resources. You been busy this week at all?
We've had a few things going on this week.
Natural resources, right?
Yeah, right.
He's been a pastor, hosted his own radio show in Georgia, has 2 children, 4 grandchildren, right?
That's right.
Anyways, so doing a great job for the citizens of Georgia. I'll give you another shout out. Go Dogs. There you go.
Roof, roof, roof. I'm sorry. No.
Mary Vought is president of Vought Strategies and a real strong advocate for life. She's been published nationally, The Hill, Washington Post, USA Today. She previously worked for Ron Johnson in the Senate. And for a little guy from the 6th District of Indiana named Mike Pence, who's not really gone anywhere in life, not really done anything, when he was the House Republican Conference Chair. And then we have Alison Centofante, who's the Director of External Affairs at Live Action. Does everybody know who Live Action is? Mm-hmm. Doing excellent work. She's been on Fox, NPR, ABC, making the rounds like good activists do. So, and my name is Matt Smith. I'm the president of Catholic Advocate, which is a large Catholic grassroots advocacy organization, and I'm also a board member of ACU. So thank you all for being here as we go through Scammed Parenthood. So a couple things to just kind of set the stage, and I got tipped off by my wife. My wife's a sociologist, and she told me about a book that a Dutch sociologist had written, and she says, well, there's a book called The Age of Empathy. And I said, well, I don't think a Dutch author is really talking about America. She says, you need to go to Amazon and download it onto the Kindle real quick. And he actually was talking about America. But he starts his book because it's called The Age of Empathy, Nature's Lessons for a Kinder Society. And he says, are we our brother's keepers? Do we have an instinct for compassion? Or are we as often assumed only on earth to serve our own survival and interests? He then spent, as I was reading through it, he spends the whole time examining animals, not us, animals. And he comes to the conclusions, though, that humans can actually work together towards a just society based on a more generous and accurate view of human nature, where we do have an instinct of compassion rather than the assumption of our inherent selfishness. Now, as I was reading this, I was thinking to myself, there's this really large entity in our country, this presence in our country, through its philosophy, its mission, its tactics, their lies, which we'll talk about here today with you all, that runs counter to an age of empathy. It runs completely counter to the compassion, the value of life, the dignity of life, the sanctity of human life, all the things that make America great, which ties into our theme of CPAC this year. And so it's Planned Parenthood. That's what you know what we're here to talk about, before the elaborate title and age of empathy and sociological thinking. And you guys are smart. I bet if I did a quick little straw poll of hands, you're aware of some of Planned Parenthood's scams and lies. Some of the things like they can't exist without government funding. They're not the only source of women's health care in the country. In fact, the extent of their women's health care is what they call it health care, but it's providing abortions and screenings for STDs and HIV. and the reality that they perform more abortions than adoption referrals. And that's in their own annual reports. They put it up on the web. They talk about it. These are facts, and we're going to talk about some of that here amongst us, but also try to give you all maybe some things that you've not read before, not seen on the internet, or not seen, maybe we'll get a teaser on some things that Live Action is working on, or that Mary knows, or the congressman knows from his good work. But one of the things that we wanted to start off with is, especially there was a vote in the Senate recently, and there was a lot of debate in this town about the science and the realities. I'm a father of 3, and the most exciting moment for all 3 of our kids, hearing that heartbeat that first time, that very, very early ultrasound, and the science behind that. So, Alison, I want to throw to you first to kind of start us off. Where are we getting scammed? Where are we getting lied to? Where are the American people getting lied to on the science and all these other, the way we've had the debate, we saw it come to light, with the Senate vote recently.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. And thank you guys for filling this room. I think it says a lot to CPAC to say we seriously care about life. We care about the fact that Planned Parenthood is still existing and still committing over 900 abortions every single day. So thank you. The fact that you're here in this room says to us, it says to me, that you care deeply about women and families and children. And to tie in that this age of empathy that we're living in, you're here because you care about people at their very origin. So first, thank you. Secondly, I will say, I don't want to share with you what you already know. You guys are so smart. You probably follow Live Action, you follow what's going on in the life movement. What I want to do is talk about some of these scams you might not know about or know how to talk about. So one, we solved the problem of members of Congress not knowing prenatal science and embryology this week. The biggest scam that's happening in our society today is that we are allowing a conversation about abortion to happen without making people define what an abortion is. You want a woman's right to choose what? What are you choosing to do? We have members of Congress voting on bills, pro-life abortion bills, this infanticide bill, which I'll point out, it's the same to kill a child a minute after their abortion fails. It's the same child we should fight for. You have a media that is allowed to talk about abortion in the sense of euphemisms. Byproduct of conception, termination of pregnancy. We need to be pushing people to understand that you can detect a heartbeat as early as 6 weeks. It starts even earlier, as early as 22 days. We should be the ones saying, DNA is a new, unique set of DNA is there right at the moment of conception. And talking about these things changes minds. What Live Action has done is created a series of abortion procedures videos. We don't just want to say, go teach, we want to help you. These medically animated videos, guys, have become the most widely viewed pro-life videos on the internet. They've received over 140 million views, and it's a medical animation like you'd see at the Mayo Clinic or in a university class. And we've taken it to the streets. It was pretty scary. You go to San Francisco, Chicago, Times Square. I did it there myself. And I was so nervous people might just freak out, throw the iPad back at me. I don't want to see it. Can I tell you? That's not the reaction. These people are so moved. They had no idea that abortion involves depriving a child of nutrition by giving it poison, inserting it with digoxin to stop its heart, waiting for it to die, maybe not waiting, tearing its arms and legs, sometimes inducing a late-term abortion that has to be induced anyway. This is the reality of abortion. And I watch people's minds change in 4 minutes. They take those headphones out and they say, I never knew. This has to stop. So that's my first scam, I think, is that we need to talk about, first off, what abortion is before we move on into the other things Planned Parenthood does.
So you can change people's minds in 4 minutes in Times Square, but yet some of your colleagues.
Yeah. Hey.
Be on the inside, and some of us that have worked in the life movement and been up on Capitol Hill and some of these meetings, and then there's the other meetings. There's those closed door meetings. There's the, off the floor, the cloakroom discussions, or even on the floor during votes. What are you seeing? What are you trying to do? We know Congressman Hice has introduced several pro-life pieces of legislation in this Congress. He is a pro-life champion, and we're really honored to have him here today. But tell us what you're hearing, what you're seeing, what your experience is. You fight for the dignity of human life.
We need that same video in Congress. I mean, it's a great point that you can do in 4 minutes on Times Square what we seemingly have not been able to accomplish in decades in Washington, D.C., and that just seems inexcusable to me. I would say the glimmer of hope, though, that we're seeing right now is twofold. Between what happened in New York and the celebration that occurred after that vote to as recently as this past week with what happened in the Senate, I have seen more people talking about, in utter disbelief, where the pro-choice movement is taking us, where the abortion movement, the pro-death movement is taking us. It really is no longer just about abortion. It's always been about murder, but it's now murder that is so visible. We're talking now actual discussion and actual debate about a live after birth baby that you can hold and touch and hug and watch cry and all this, and now laying that baby on the table and saying, should we let it live or shall we kill it? I mean, even people in my district who are pro-choice look at this new direction with disgust, and they don't want infanticide. But this is where the movement is taking us, and I would say for the first time, probably, I think it's fair to say, the first time really since I've been in Congress now in my third term, of serious discussion that we've got to stop this. And yet, I can't describe the sadness of seeing the Senate not even being able to get this thing rolling. It's like unbelievable. We do have a discharge petition that Steve Scalise is leading in the House to bring the Born Alive bill to the floor and force both Republicans and Democrats to go on record with where they stand on this issue of a baby born alive. Unfortunately, it's not going to go anywhere because of what just happened in the Senate. So this is where really I think momentum now is needed more than ever on the state level to pass heartbeat bills, to pass, if we can go even beyond that, bills I've put out there, the sanctity of human life that recognizes life begins at conception. But, if heartbeat bills, we've been pushing for that so hard in Washington. We've made great progress this last session, last Congress. Of course, that has the brakes on it now as well. But this is where all of us, I think, come into the picture perhaps like never before. I think as states start taking strong pro-life action, that only in the long run helps us in Washington eventually to be able to come full circle and duplicate what is happening on the state level. Just last week, I was able to meet with the governor of Georgia and our lieutenant governor and all our elected leaders, and to deal specifically with the heartbeat bill that's been introduced in Georgia. And I'm getting assurances that if they can get over the finish line, that they'll sign it, that this thing's going to go forward. So if we can get these type of things on the state level, I cannot tell you the momentum that provides in Washington.
And I think for everybody that's out here that has joined us, that's a phenomenal point, and actually goes into one of the things that we want CPAC to be for you all. It's not just a great 3 or 4 days where you get to hear some great speakers, you get to hear from people like us, but you got to go home and take what you learn here and put it into action. And the Congressman just gave everybody in this room a great piece of action to take home to your state. Now, I know there might be some state dynamics where you're from, where, like New York, might be a little more challenging, but there are things that can be done places, and he just gave you a great piece of homework to do. And when you take it home, you can also personalize it a little bit, and that's also something where we've got Mary here, who's going to share with us her personal story. I don't know Mary well. I know her husband, who is the acting director of OMB, doing a great job for President Trump and the administration. So, for some of us that work in this town, if you've got a partner or a spouse that, wife, husband that also works in things like that, you're both allies and you share the views and stuff like that. And I've known Russ for going on 22 years, and a little word of the wise, be nice to your interns, because they might become the acting director of OMB.
He was your intern.
So, Mary's going to talk about their daughter and her views on life and how she's come to them, and it's something I think that you all can take, because I'm sure there are people, those of you out there that might have similar stories or families or acquaintances as well. So please share with us.
Thank you for hiring Russ too. It helped him get to where he is today. 5 years ago, my youngest daughter, she was born with a life-threatening genetic disorder called cystic fibrosis, otherwise known as CF. And at that time, about 70% of women, that's 7 out of 10 women, that were carrying a child and found out that it had CF, chose to abort it. I honestly lost count of the number of times that doctors, nurses, genetic counselors felt the need to aggressively inform me of my options when it came to her life. Not one of them encouraged me to meet with an individual living with CF, or to visit a CF clinic or visit a pulmonologist. Regardless of the pressure, I stayed grounded in my pro-life beliefs and gave birth to her. But to a woman on the fence, the arguments were being made from a very one-sided, very aggressive position. Now my daughter is young, 5 years old. She's living a very good life. I wish I brought a picture of her for you because she is so cute. Yet she hasn't fully grasped the understanding of her condition or her disease. And someday I'm going to have a very difficult conversation with her about her condition and about her estimated life expectancy, which is a lot less than all of us. But I'm also going to have an even more difficult conversation with her when I explain that there are people in this country, under the guise of feminism, women's rights, choice, that would have honestly loved it. They would have celebrated if I had ended her life. I mean, think about that. Someday she's going to find out that Planned Parenthood and its supporters view individuals like herself, people living with disabilities, as less than human. They have encouraged the narrative that the sickest among us are unwanted, they are a burden, and they are an opportunity that should have been aborted in the womb. In her lifetime, she'll probably see a stronger push for eugenics, like we've seen in Iceland or Denmark, where they've publicly bragged about the fact that they have eradicated the Down syndrome gene. She'll see a stronger push to customize what elites in our society determine as the perfect child, one that is healthy, one with no physical deformities at all. We in this room, we know that the deadly discrimination of children with disabilities is an epidemic. There is a profound lack of understanding amongst Planned Parenthood and its supporters as to the dignity of human life, exactly what you mentioned. We know that a society that sanctions the euthanization of the sickest among us lies to its people and engages in state-sponsored despair. Now, I encourage a lot of young individuals in their careers, and many of them are getting involved in the pro-life movement. And so many times they tell me, like, I want to be involved in the movement. I don't really know how. I feel like I'm not really capable. I'm just a staff assistant for a congressman. I'm just a student. And my response to them is always the same. I look at them sitting across from me and I say, you right now, you can inhale and fill your lungs with air, and you can exhale. And in your heart, in your chest, you have a heart that is beating blood throughout your entire body. Those are two things that an aborted baby does not have. Those two things make you extremely capable to be able to speak out on life. Extremely. You need to use that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Mary just talked about the doctors, your own, medical professionals, which is just disheartening. My son was born with a congenital heart defect, and we had a different experience. We had some great doctors that said, no, you're taking this baby, we're going to operate on him when he comes out, and just breaks my heart that you didn't have that type of, the supportive medical team that brought our son to have, and that I'm sure some of you have friends and family and stuff like that. Is this something that we're seeing, the penetration into even the mainstream medical culture, the Planned Parenthood ethos? Is this something that you all, if you guys investigate this through live action, that it's starting to go beyond the Planned Parenthood clinics and, even more and penetrate into where they're getting their basic, prenatal care?
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. It's so beautifully said, and we're so glad that you chose life. So many probably don't have the same backbone that you do, right? And you pointed out that. And so I want to make this personal for everyone in here, knowing that some may be post-abortive themselves. Imagine you are in an unplanned pregnancy, your mom, your sister, your daughter, and you walk into what you think is the nation's largest women's healthcare organization. Surely they will help me. And if you walk into a door of a Planned Parenthood clinic as a pregnant woman, you need to know there's a couple things that we found, we tested, we're not just saying this. Live Action called over about 100 Planned Parenthood facilities and asked for an ultrasound. And we were told, nope, we only provide ultrasounds in the cases of abortion. If you want an ultrasound, you can go to a pregnancy resource center. They do not provide ultrasounds unless it's for an abortion. And usually, as Abby Johnson points out, that's just to determine the size of the head so that they can determine how much to charge you. These are not free. I have to remind people across the country, they're not giving them out for free. They have a financial interest in abortion. They are an abortion provider. Number two, there's no prenatal care. We called and asked for prenatal care. Not an option for a pregnant woman. What you will find, and our undercover investigative videos have shown this, is abortionists and their workers pressuring women to choose abortion over any other option. We've done a series of investigations, and they're still incredibly relevant today because while they started the defund Planned Parenthood movement, we haven't finished it yet. Yeah. Congress needs to do a lot more. So good start, but keep going. We saw them being willing to accept race-based donations. We had people test and call in and say, I want to abort a black baby. And they said, wow, we're excited. We'll take your name down. We've seen them fail to report child sex abuse and sex trafficking. We had investigators actually pose as a sex abuse victim and then also as a trafficker. And Planned Parenthood was more than willing to work with both to procure an abortion and failed to report it as they are required to do by state law. We've seen them push women in late-term points of pregnancy towards abortion. And when those investigators who are pregnant women, there's some of you in this room, they're pregnant, they're sitting there, they're talking to people like Leroy Carhart, some of the nation's most notorious late-term abortion doctors, Cesar Santangelo right here in Washington, D.C. They proposed the very question that the Born Alive Survivors Protection Act was trying to address, which is, what would you do if this baby survived the abortion? And on video, these late-term abortionists say, we would make sure they don't survive. Well, what do you mean, we would ask? Don't worry about it. We would make sure they don't survive. Well, what if I deliver at home and it's still breathing? And we were told, put it in a bag. Flush it. This is the ethos of an organization that gets $500 million of taxpayer funds every year. We pulled $60 million away through Title X. But I want to point out another scam that has to do with our funding of them. I have a feeling those in this room, abortion is your number one issue. And if it's not, I want it to be. It should be. It's okay for it to be. We need to end this human rights abuse now. All of the air, if you've watched what's going on in Congress, all of the air in the room is sucked out over reproductive rights, right? We need to fix this so we can get to some other things. We can end this. But number two, the money that we give them, if abortion is not maybe your issue or your family's, I want to point this out. We prop up this corrupt, pressuring, failing organization with our tax dollars. Their breast cancer screenings are going down. Their pap smear tests are going down. Their manual breast exams are going down. What's going up is abortion and our federal funding. So we prop them up. Their mega donors from Hollywood then can give their millions to their political action arms. And those political action arms spent $20 million in the midterm elections to send people here to Washington, D.C. to work against us and Representative Jody Hice every day. So if you care about winning, you should care about the fact that we are propping up our opposition with our tax dollars. So that's a scam as well that we are doing all we can to point out.
Show of hands real quick. How many of you are just frustrated by this? Well, just frustrated by, I mean, we've been talking for years about defund, and in every turn we maneuver, they outmaneuver, things like that. I know you're thinking this on some of these things, and what are you and some of your colleagues thinking? I feel like we're constantly playing this three-dimensional chessboard against just this force, and like you talked about, we're propping them up. And how much do they make off of their abortions every year?
They performed over 323,000 abortions, and they have millions in excess revenue.
Mm-hmm. And how many adoption referrals?
Oh, is it one for every 60, I think? One for every, I think.
It was roughly 300,000 plus abortions, 3,000 adoption referrals. So what's the business?
Yeah.
What's the business? What are you guys talking about these days?
All right, so we have all in this room and in Congress who share what we share. We've tried for a long time to defund Planned Parenthood. You know that. There's been one bill after another after another. None of them have been able to get across the finish line ultimately. But the way we want them to, I mean, we've had some small successes. But I do want to give you some hope. It's fantastic to me that the president has been so committed on the issue of life.
Yes.
And just this past week, the HHS Secretary Azar, the new rule on Title X to tighten it up. We already have laws that you're not supposed to have taxpayer money going to pay abortions. We all know, but they find all these ways around it. And so just this past week, the Protect Life rule went into effect that really tightens much more the inability for tax dollars to go to Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers, but primarily Planned Parenthood. And it includes things like organizations that refer to abortion. So what you've got Planned Parenthood over here, and okay, so somebody couldn't go in there and they refer an abortion. So Planned Parenthood would have other clinics, and they would start referring abortions and sending all of them over to Planned Parenthood. So that's wiped out. Any entity that refers for abortion no longer gets Title X funding. Any facility that is physically in the same building as an abortion provider, there has to be a separate physical and financial separation completely. So that takes away all this mixing of businesses and financial entities to continue supporting abortions. And the abuse, it's now required that they abide by the abuse laws of the state, or they cannot get Title X funding. So this has just gone into effect this past week, and it is directed towards primarily Planned Parenthood. And I just think, here we've not been able to get these things over the finish line, and we have now in the White House great leadership that's doing for us what we've not been able to get accomplished. And I'm just grateful, and I hope that will encourage each of you if you're not aware of it already.
Was anybody in the room aware of that? Did you see any news coverage of that?
No, that's
No.
true.
Okay. In fact, we had our conference call. I think you were on a plane. Some of us in preparing for this panel for y'all. And an hour later is when the HHS released that. And one of the reasons it's also important, you might have heard people talking about the deep state, with the intelligence community. There is a deep state in the bureaucracy in Washington of people perpetuating an agenda in places like HHS and other departments and things like that, where they're keeping this agenda going. So you guys pass a great law, or president signs something, and then the deep state, these career unelected bureaucrats, go into overdrive to undermine it. Yep. Write rules that make it overly complicated for anybody to comply with it if it's something, or make it so it's real easy for someone not to comply with it. And that's, like you said, so the Title X rule that the Department of HHS put out this week is a great first step in that. So, encourage you to go read on it. The White House and HHS are being very open about it, and I'm just fine with pro-life Americans knowing that we've got a president out there doing the right things. I don't watch the nightly news at night. It's I'm usually coaching, or it's a waste of time. I think we want these things to also be interactive for you all. You're going to hear lots of great speeches in the main ballroom, but you're able to interact with us. And one of the great things about CPAC is interacting with everybody and having a chance to ask questions and for us to answer them, or feedback and network with each other. Based on what we've laid out here already, does anybody have a question for us? Does anybody want to engage? Yeah, in the back, right there. Your hand went up first.
Congressman Hice, the discharge petition, how many signatures do you need on it to actually?
A discharge petition requires a majority of the House of Representatives. So at this point, it would require 212. There is a 30-day ripening period before signatures can be collected. So that discharge petition is still in that period of time, probably about, and it's 30 legislative days. So last week we were in the district, so last week didn't count at all. So that discharge is probably about halfway through that 30-day ripening period. So I would anticipate probably mid-April that will ripen, and at that point we can get signatures. And the challenge is going to be getting 212 signatures. But there again, that reveals where people are. Yeah. And we're going to have signatures of who is going to support these babies who are born alive and who won't. So either way, it'll be very revealing.
I'll take the back, because sometimes, go ahead. All the way in the back.
Yeah, I believe it was Alison. You spoke about the experience of showing these videos in Times Square. I wonder if you could share a little bit about, first, where we could, and I assume it's on your website, how we might use that in our efforts, and also if you can speak about that Alive in New York event that's coming up and what your thoughts are on that.
Okay. I don't know about Alive in New York. I know the day of mourning. Is that what you're referring to?
Focus on the families doing it. They're going to do ultrasounds of third trimester ladies on big screens.
I have heard of that. That's great. Yeah, thanks for the question. Sure, so those videos are available. The easy title is abortionprocedures.com. You'll remember that. But if you're taking it to a outside of our circle, we also can use anyonecanchange.com. And here's why. Because people can change. We've seen Marist polling a huge shift in pro-life views. So this is a heavy topic, and it should be. This is the greatest human rights issue of our time. But the good news is this. Because Democrats are showing their extremism, people, including Democrats, are realizing you're way farther than I am. The Democrat Party believes in abortion through all 9 months for any reason at the taxpayer dollar, and now is on the record for even allowing a baby to be left to die if they happen to be strong enough to survive the abortion, like Gianna Jessen and Melissa Oden. I mean, there's an abortion survivors network. The fact that there are people coming together saying, that's me, is amazing. So use those videos. I mean, here's the thing. Congress and what can happen here in DC is a pivotal part of ending abortion. Absolutely. But we are not to look to members of Congress or the president as our savior on this issue. It is up to us, particularly right now, when people are talking about it. I mean, I'll ask, how many people here have seen someone post on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, something speaking out against New York or Virginia or this abortion extremism that you didn't even ever see comment before? I've had friends and family reach out, and I'm like, I'm so proud of them. They're ready to get into this. So I encourage you to use this moment in time. I think we can all say that. Use this moment in time where people are wondering, really, are we really talking about infanticide? Why? How did we get here? Speaking up on this issue, I want it to be as easy as possible, and just like Mary made a great point, you don't have to go to medical school to acknowledge the beauty of life. Though I do have an amazing doctor that shares about these procedures at that website, abortionprocedures.com. So I encourage you to use it. You can use it on the street. You can use it with friends and family on campus.
Back over there by the door. Yep.
I've heard people argue that we should educate young people on practicing safe sex to prevent unwanted pregnancies. What would you say to those people, or what would you guys say about educating people on practicing?
So the question, let me make sure I understand. What would we say? Some advocates have said to educate young people on practicing.
Yes, so we don't have people in a position of an unwanted pregnancy.
So contraception, right? I would say, when you start going into that, you have the people that are making those arguments are advocating for abortifacients when you really get down to it. And when I say abortifacients, birth control pills. Yeah, and so, or some sort of pharmaceutical treatment either before or after conception in some sort of context. And I think that is an extent, and I'll throw to some others here. I think that is an extension of what we're talking about here. They're going at it from a different angle.
Like in schools, like when we're looking at people in colleges and stuff, and high schools, do you think that should be part of the curriculum? Or how should we spread the word about how to prevent pregnancies?
Well, I feel like oftentimes they don't always give you the other side of that, which is adoption, which is having the baby and giving it to a family that can provide for it adequately. And so, like in my own experience, I feel like they're very, very centric in the agenda that they're trying to push, and not really giving you both sides and caring for the life of the child, like you said with the agenda.
You tried a couple times now.
Sorry.
Thanks. I'd like to thank everyone on the panel, but especially Mary, for your testimony. Also, I'd like to ask, last year, or no, 2 years ago, Bernie Sanders asked your husband about his faith
Yes.
in his confirmation hearing.
Yes.
And I'd love to hear how that was for you, and then also if that applies to pro-life activism. We've had people like Senator Kamala Harris say that Catholic groups that oppose abortion are horrific, and that if anybody is a member of them, that person should not be qualified for public office.
Yeah.
How do you respond to these attacks?
Well, I think we make it sometimes really hard for people to serve in public office. We want the best and the brightest, and yet we're imposing these religious tests that are unconstitutional. And I feel like my husband did a very good job in the position that he has presented, and better than me if I was standing at the podium talking to Bernie Sanders personally. But yeah, I definitely, I don't think that his beliefs have anything to do with his ability to serve government and any ability to balance the budget or for us to be fiscally responsible.
The back again.
Do you think a piece of the puzzle is providing more programs for
Yeah, I definitely think you need a network of people that can support you and care for you, and just people. I'm part of many CF support groups, and just the bond that you have with those individuals is just something that you will never have with anyone else. And just that encouragement with community, local church, people like that, friends, I definitely think that's important. But regardless if I was one person living on a planet by myself, I would have still chose life for her. So regardless of that community, which is a complete blessing and something that I'm very grateful for, I still, looking at her life and the great life that she has lived, I still 10 times over would have chosen life for her.
But, something to also piggyback on, though, is our next-door neighbors had a daughter that was born with Down syndrome. And one night, the mother commented to us that it was easier for her to find a place where she could go in the pregnancy than it was to find some Down syndrome support groups in our neighborhood. And their decision was made. And Victoria is beautiful. She's a beautiful little girl. But it was easier for her to go to Planned Parenthood or one of these other places than it was to find a Down syndrome support group in our community. And so we got to do more about raising those up and raising up that, so those groups can be profiled, just as much. So, yeah.
Congressman, the Democrats control the House now. Other than, I think in Chicago, Daniel Lipinski is a Democrat who is apparently very pro-life. Is there anyone else in the Democratic caucus that is pro-life?
I would imagine that there probably are, but they're awfully quiet, and so I can't tell you who they are. There's a lot of pressure on the Democratic side of the aisle to not be pro-life, and so my guess, just my gut feeling, if by nothing else, just looking at some districts across the country that now have some Democrats who have been elected, chances are pretty good that they hold at least to some basic pro-life principles, but I would venture to say they're scared to be outspoken about that. And that would be another good reason if we're able to get things like Born Alive on the discharge, we'll know a little bit more for sure.
All the way in the back, gentleman in the back. Yeah, you.
Yeah, we tried something similar to that last Congress. I'm trying to pull out of my head right now exactly how it was, but had something to do with recognizing, I believe it had to do with school credits. Could y'all help me on this? I'm trying to, that gave a credit if the mom was pregnant, acknowledging that this baby in the womb is a human life. It did get pulled out. I believe that was in the tax cut bill, and a great effort trying to get that in there, which recognized human life in the womb, but it did get pulled out. So there have been some efforts to do things similarly, but as it relates specifically to the census, nothing that I'm aware of.
It's an interesting idea.
Yes,
young
it is.
lady in the back.
Hi, so on a campus where the other side is not just pushing a pro-choice agenda, but not willing to talk about it, what type of advice do you have for that? We have brought things up to them, but instead of engaging in that conversation, they actually just censored our speech. So how can we actively engage them when they are so fragile?
Why don't you take that, and I'll give a commercial for another group.
Yeah, I might have one too. Well, thank you, and awesome. Of course you should be talking about this on campus, right? It's the free marketplace of ideas, or as it should be. Before I was at Live Action, I worked at Alliance Defending Freedom. So if your administration is not letting you talk about your club or your beliefs, then you should call 1-800-TELL-ADF, and they will maybe write a strongly worded letter from a lawyer that will help you out. So you've got support there. But I would say, from what I've seen in my work at Live Action, there's groups like Students for Life. Persistence is key, and making paper trails and making note of all the times that you've tried to make things happen. I mean, Lila is speaking at UCLA next week, and we're advertising, and people are tearing down posters and kicking them over, and it's to be expected, right? This is a hostile issue, but it doesn't mean we stop. We are not called to stop. And no great human rights issue ever was ended by people giving up or getting scared or backing down from sharing the truth in love. And we started this panel talking about empathy. Don't forget, we are the peaceful, nonviolent side of this movement. There is anger on the other side for a lot of reasons. We saw this year, guys, with I think some of the Kavanaugh rally stuff. There's a lot of anger. There are post-abortive men and women that I've met, and you guys have too. We have to acknowledge that the left is not allowing them to heal. By saying that there's nothing to be lost, you didn't lose anything. There was nothing there. It doesn't let women and men, my dad's post-abortive, heal. And so just go into that. There are people that are hurting. And so I hope you can figure that out on campus, maybe in individual conversations, but also keep it up, call ADF, call us, we want to help you, absolutely.
And some may not know this, but Students for Life successfully sued a university last year and won. They sued Ball State University in Muncie, Indiana, my alma mater, and won. I'll tell you what, the president of Ball State was here in DC yesterday. I came to CPAC. I didn't go have a reception with him. But you can stand up for yourself, and there's ADF, there's Students for Life. There are people that will help you on your campus fight for your right to free speech and educate and be pro-life. So do not give up. Do not give up. I'm trying to go back and forth on the sides. You're right here in the front.
Yes, I'm wondering about when you look at the Planned Parenthood website these days, they've morphed into a whole, we have campaigns going, so I've always wondered about the legality of that. Here is an organization, I guess there's nothing we can do about it because there's something that has been done, but they specifically list, here's who we support, here's why. They've also got the whole social justice thing going on top of their platform as well. So I'm wondering if your organization maybe brings, I'm not aware if they do, or maybe that could be a way to sort of get around the people who, well, okay, Planned Parenthood, I'm not sure, but I really don't like supporting all these other radical things, and what does that have to do?
Maybe. It's the great intersectionality, right?
It's a big part of it, and also bringing up the having good, making good reproductive choices for the young. I noticed recently that they have a whole thing where they denounce and they attack what I believe is still in the public schools as of 2010. They brought it back, I believe, practicing, abstinence and being responsible with yourself and respectful with others. And they have a huge statement about that where they say that if you practice, you won't have blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And there are those, they're really attacking it part punch and trying to remove that from the public schools. And I'd love to see.
Yeah, and we get to fund the marketing campaign.
Yep.
I mean, no, federal funds cannot go to abortion, but they sure can help you build a website. They can help you rally and activate your base. And so, yeah, you're touching on intersectionality. Any of us here in DC have shown up at the Supreme Court on different days for different cases, and Planned Parenthood is there, and you're like, what are you doing here? This isn't about abortion. Well, it's because abortion is a dying cause. People are becoming more and more pro-life, and it's less and less favorable to be as pro-abortion as they are, so they're jumping on bandwagons. And absolutely are in the school system as well. I know we're wrapping up, we can talk more after, but they are in the school system and they are promoting promiscuity across the country because it makes customers for them.
Let me just add one real quick thing to that. The rule that was added this past week, when I talk about the referral part of it, you can't refer to, that really came down to this issue of advertising. So when there's another corporation or entity that is referring, in essence, advertising, go over here and get your abortion, and that perhaps can include website. I mean, if the web is encouraging the abortion, then there may be something there that this rule will address that as well.
Okay. That's all the time we have for this panel. I want to thank Alison, Mary, the congressman.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
But, most important,